Hello and welcome to this episode of Start Revelations with Maria Jones and myself, Morgana Sophia. Welcome into what could only be described as a very spicy March, Maria. How's it for you?
Well, I think everybody is feeling the intensity, aren't they? We're recording this just as Venus and Mercury are stationary. Neptunia's on the last degree of Pisces. We're in the eclipse portal, so I think we can safely say that everything feels slightly uncertain and wobbly.
And
To
we
put
were
it
just chatting
lightly.
before we started recording as that how that Pisces new moon, the opening of that eclipse portal, and then the energy just started on a geopolitical level to create fireworks, shall we say?
It absolutely did. And I think the important thing to remember with all of this Neptune and retrograde energy is that things are never what they seem. And we often don't get the truth of what is happening until the retrograde completes and the shadow period is recovered, which is going to take us right through until early May. So we've got the planets kind of stationing direct, Mercury and Venus in mid-April. But until we get through Beltane, we've actually got all of these planets, including Mars, still in retrograde shadow. So there's a lot that's still unraveling, even from last October, as Mars kind of picks up her retrograde shadow too. So we've got this real interesting energy. I always think of this Neptune Pisces. We've got the moon in Gemini today as well. We've still got Jupiter in Gemini. She's still making her way through, which makes everything a little bit hard to grasp. It's a little bit shapeshiftery. It's a little bit
Mm.
polarized. So I feel like it's a very interesting time. Things are, as I say, never what they seem with Neptune.
No, and the energy is very Gemini at the moment, isn't it? It's very shapeshiftery kind of. You're seeing a lot of words being crafted, and eclipse season, as the great Pam Gregory always says, eclipse seasons sometimes reveal, but mostly they conceal. So I think there's a lot of hidden information and deception and delusion in the field, which you and I have picked up on quite a lot. It feels a very unstable day today when we're recording.
Absolutely. We feel like we're on the brink of something as we're going into March, don't we? And we're building up to, these big eclipses and these huge planetary shifts. I know we're going to get into Neptunia in Aries and Saturnia in Aries a little bit today. But Neptune's really on that final degree of the zodiac where she hasn't been since 1861. That was the last time that she crossed this threshold. So we are in this really pivotal time, building up to these Saturn Neptune conjunctions, which I'm sure we're going to get into a little bit historically and dates wise as we go through. But this is the final degree of the zodiac. We've got the North Node here. Venus is going to back through, Mercury is going to back through. So it's that real element of surrender to the chaos, I think, that is very
Mm.
prominent as we're speaking today. So yeah, it's really interesting. The
And,
moon's in Gemini too, just for
and
fun.
for me, it's surrendering to the chaos without being polarized as well. Just allowing the waters to kind of wash over you, that all will be revealed in due course. And we thought today we'd really focus on Neptunia moving into Aries, and then when we sit down to record, probably look at Saturnia in Aries and how these two giant S's are going to kind of come together next February, which I feel like we're in this year of preparation and build up to this thing, this massive, call it a thing. It's this event. It feels like it's going to be quite stellar, actually.
Absolutely. It's to me, it's unprecedented. So I've been looking back to see if I can find another time in history when they conjuncted in Aries at 0 degrees. And going back as far as 594 BCE, it
No.
just hasn't happened. That's as far back as I could go with the software that I had. So it may have happened previous to that. But we are looking at something that only happens once every 323 years in the sign of Aries. So with astrology, it's always cycles within cycles. And Neptune and Saturnia conjunct around every 36 years, but obviously always in a different sign. The last time was in Capricorn in 1989, and Urania was there with them too. So again, that was a huge catalytic moment. That
That
was the
was,
year my brother was born, actually.
and actually 1989, just thinking about it, wasn't that the year the Berlin Wall came down as well? And we kind of saw the end of communism in that shape and form, essentially. That was quite a cataclysmic year, actually.
It really was when you look at the history of it. And this is Saturn Neptune. It's the dissolving of the established order. And obviously, Capricorn is very much about patriarchy, structure, things that have been in place for a very long time. And that was when that last conjunction happened. So now we're looking ahead to this conjunction that is building this year to complete in February of 2026. And it's not only in Aries, it's at 0 degrees. And like I've said, it's hard to see if that's ever happened before. So we're really on this cusp of birthing a whole new reality collectively, the old structures are falling, and new leaders are emerging. But in a typical Neptune fashion, are they illusory heroes, or heroines? Is this, are we idealizing people? Because we know that unfortunately Aries has a strong connection to war, and this particular transit of Neptune in Aries has a strong connection with religious wars and persecution, which I know you've been looking into, so I will stop talking for a moment.
History buff in me comes out. I was thinking about this earlier actually, and I did history at A level, and it was almost my degree choice. And I was like, oh, why did I do that as my degree choice? I did law instead, But history is vastly important, and it kind of shows us what's going to happen. And I really, really went back into you know, the history of, of Neptunia being in Aries and what happened. And the place I really want to go back to is kind of 60 to 73 AD. So that was Boudicca's rebellion against the Romans. So we remember when we talked about this with Pluto and Aquarius, was in Aquarius at the same time. This was this bloody revolution. It was the rise of this strong feminine power against the patriarchy. I mean, sadly, she didn't win, but actually, are we going to be seeing these cycles closed out? And part of my research as well is that something that happens in one Neptune cycle in Aries seems to close out in the one preceding it, the one after it, sorry. So we've got Neptune kind of relating to spirituality, religious change. Then we had 1042 to 1057, the setting up and the schism of the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church as well. Going a little bit further back, I missed one out, when it was in 388, Theodophilus in Roman Empire banned paganism. Then we've got the schism of the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is still massive today. They still have two separate Easters, two separate churches, two different, I guess, popes and religious leaders. And there's been a lot of scandals in that 1042 to 1057 around popes. And I find that
Mm.
particularly interesting that there's always been a scandal with regards to the church, with regards to the church and royalty's involvement with religion and whether how much political power has been, but also, how much do we want to see interference from the state in religion and religion interfering in the state? So I find that particularly interesting. Lots of
Mm.
scandals around the Pope, and as we're recording this at the moment, the current Pope is quite unwell. We don't know what's gonna happen to him next. So that for me was like really interesting that this is happening just before the cycle. Because I mean, when Neptune goes in, what is it, the 30th of March this year, isn't it? So we are on that kind of downward trajectory into that entry. We've had the Christian Crusades in the 12th century. We've had King John in the UK, Magna Carta, church and state, how much power and influence. We had the creation of the Dominican and Franciscan orders. So they're the monks, but also the Paul Clares as well. So I've always been fascinated. I'm getting excited, sorry. I've always been fascinated about the Paul Clares because they basically rescind the world and live a vow of absolute poverty and silence. And but we also know from our research, and we're going to do another podcast on it, about the rise of divine feminine leadership. Neptune is in Aries. And as we look at other things that are going to happen as well, just, I'm getting really excited, but, the Peasants' Revolt in the 13th century,
Mm,
1533, the Reformation of the Church of England, reforms of the church, Calvinism, Henry VIII's Witchcraft Act, go a bit later into kind of the 1697s period, the creation of the United Kingdom, the Scottish witch burning, the War of Spanish Succession.
mm,
And then the last time Neptune was in Aries, we had the American Civil War. We had Germany being unified essentially and then became a military power. We've had the Japanese rising as a global power and then the first Spanish Republic. So we often think of the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s, but they obviously had one a lot earlier and deposed the Queen. So also in anyway, let's chat about that first because there's other bits and pieces historically that are going to
mm.
come up as well. So like the creation of communism in the last time
Interesting.
Neptune was in Aries, but it's a really rich theme of this religion, spirituality, the role of women. It's quite interesting, the kind of the witchcraft acts, the creation of the Paul Clares, and then the rise of these global powers. Because don't forget, a lot of these would have happened during empires like the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, the
Mm.
Austro-Hungarian Empire. It's a lot of history to kind of really dig deep in, and I've dug deep, so I'll let you speak now, Marie.
So interesting. And I think empire is a really interesting Aries word, isn't it? Aries is the emperor in tarot. So there is this, I think with Neptune in Aries, there is this desire to go to war to defend our religious beliefs. So I'm really happy that Saturnia is coming behind because she really dispels the illusion and fanaticism of Neptune. So we might feel like a lot of the systems or people we believed in are revealed to be false or
Mm.
illusions as this transit unfolds over the next 18 months or so, They're going to come really close together in July this year, just within a few minutes, but they're not going to make their exact conjunction until February of next year. And I do think, as I've been reflecting on this, because when you look back through history, you think, oh, this is not a super positive transit when you all of that stuff.
There are a few. I'll mention those in a minute.
But what I was really tuning into is that we are no longer in the age of Pisces. Neptune is no longer the ruling frequency of the collective, it's Uranus.
Mm.
We are in the Aquarian age. So I'm really hoping this Saturn Neptune conjunction is going to break down these systems and reveal them for what they are, because the systems aren't broken. They're working exactly as they're intended to, right? So we've either got the choice now where we can see things clearly and we can choose to step into that revolutionary energy, where we're defending, the evolution of the collective, or we can, allow ourselves to become further enslaved in it. Because this can be the other thing. Aries is the sign of identity. So it's like things like digital identities and tracing and tracking, things like that can also be prolific I think, because we're dealing with a very different energy now because we're in the AI age.
Mm.
So this is a different manifestation, I think, of this frequency. But still, there are those same elements of persecution that we're seeing arise already. And I know you wanted to talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be really interesting the kind of persecution and kind of how we are perceived going forward as well. And the one thing that's really just jumped into my head is that last time, become that 1861 to 1875, when Neptune was last in Aries, was actually the rise of New Age spirituality, of New Thought. It was the time where, Conan Doyle set up his Ghost Club, but also we had I can never remember her name, Helena Blavatsky,
Mhm.
doing all her work as well. So as we start to think about kind of persecution and thought forms as well, that for me feels like that is coming full circle. And there may be different ways that we may be persecuted again. So we're not going to go through the witch trials again.
Mm.
God forbid that we do that. But I can see that there's going to be a backlash against that kind of inspiration, because that completely goes against AI, doesn't it? Because AI does the thinking for us, whereas when we're in our intuitiveness, when we're in our receptiveness, we are channeling something greater that AI at the moment hasn't got. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting. And then as you kind of look at religion as well, on that sense of persecution, of what side do we want to be on? How far do we want to take religion? Is religion a social construct? Are we going to see almost that dystopian future, a little bit like The Handmaid's Tale, actually? I've got that kind of vision really stuck in my head today, of that having to go down a very fundamental route of control. And I can see that kind of playing out in the collective. It's quite an unpleasant thought. It's making me shiver. It's taking me back to A levels and Handmaid's Tale. But it's that
Mm.
energy has the possibility for me of coming, because there is an energy shift where it's really difficult to describe, but this absolute fanaticism could potentially come through, where there's no separation between ideology and religion, no separation between human and tech. It's quite a scary thought and scary place to be in, really.
It is, and I always find it so interesting that they are wearing red in The Handmaid's Tale. I find that
As we are
really,
wearing red today.
really fascinating. That kind of very Babylonic Venus, Aries color,
Yeah.
in this system of submission. And I think that women are awakening at a very rapid level. And these transits through Aries and what we discussed last time of Black Moon Lilith going into Scorpio is only going to amplify that.
Mm.
So I think that when certain energies become aware of the awakening process that we're undergoing, they will work harder to shut it down. So for me, it's a time when it's even more important for us to really reclaim that Aries power. And I think with this Venus retrograde in Aries, it's really showing us a lot about that. Aries is the dragoness. And it's also
Mm.
very much, I think, about women holding wealth and power, because that is what is going to change the world, isn't it? That's what's going to break us free of these old systems. And for me, it's very oracular, it's very visionary, this Neptune and Aries energy. And we've been reading recently, haven't we, about some of the women of the Golden Dawn,
Mm.
who were all born just as Neptune went into Aries the last time. So it's this powerful feminine leadership, which is kind of running in tandem. So these two polarities are weaving at the moment. And again, it's always that we're always choosing, aren't we, which timeline we are going to access. So our work, I think, is really important at this time. You know, the more women that are in their power, the harder it is for these more divisive energies to take root.
Mm, absolutely. And again, we're in a Venus retrograde, so worth mentioning again, these, if we want to stand in our true power, if we want to stand in our true essence, I'm really welcoming that slightly, but it is a very Babylon frequency I can feel really coming through at the moment, is we have to stick and stand together, because the shadow of Neptune in Aries, and something that I was reading an article by Jessica Davidson, it's really got me thinking, is actually that it's the rise of the end of feminism. So feminism, if you think about it, isn't necessarily, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, but the traditional women's lib, the one who, back to the suffragettes, the kind of the Pankhursts, the women that we deeply resonate
Mhm.
with, who really brought forward change, not this kind of ultra feminism, but actually you could potentially see a bit of a backlash against this, of to kind of actually, well, we'll end that and we'll become submissive again. It's very much like actually walking eyes wide shut into the Handmaid's Tale. So I can see that definitely as a shadow, and something that we through our work will be absolutely desperate to not go into, and not to prevent, essentially, because that isn't where the change is going to be. That for me would be the boys have won, essentially, but the patriarchy has won, essentially. But I think it's going to be really, really interesting as we see kind of in our communities women rising to the top, but also I'd be really interested on a very geopolitical level. Who are the women coming through to lead us going forward? And actually, will we still have traditional leadership? I feel it's going to be very devolved, coming back to communities. It's almost as if we would go back to where we were in the kind of Saxon period, where we had our village and we had our huts and we had the village elders, and these will be the wise women who are incarnating at the moment. I really feel that. And we're talking about this women of the Golden Dawn as well. That would be coming full circle. So again, what can we learn from them to bring forward into this new aeon? Because they set cycle, and we end the cycle for
Mm,
them. It's kind of how I see it.
that's such an interesting reflection. Um, so I think those women, and if anybody's interested, you can read Women of the Golden Dawn by Mary K. Greer, and she's talking about the women who had a founding influence in the Golden Dawn magical system, which was maybe the first modern mystery school in the UK. Obviously, it's a bit more famous for Crowley, but it was something beyond him and before him.
And after him,
Yeah, and after him. And Dion Fortune also played a huge role in this. And
absolutely.
Dion Fortune took on a lot of the work of these women as she kind of entered the Golden Dawn, as they were coming to the end of their
Mm,
journeys and incarnations. And what a lot of these women were actually doing, hello Twinkle,
Twinkle.
what a lot of these women were actually doing around this time, because they felt the kind of the echoes of war, like we're feeling in the time that we're living in. And what they were actually doing was a lot of astral magic to help keep the earth balanced. And obviously there's
Mm.
a very famous book about that, the magical battle of Britain, and there's a
Just
whole
going to
story
mention that.
around that. But this is something that, as you have quite rightly said, which I think is such an interesting thought, is that now we're picking up the baton. And what are we going to do with it? Because we do have these kind of two pathways which young women are being nudged down right now. You've either got the trad wife, kind of the reprisal of the trad wife, the very
Mm.
conservative type energy, or you've got this OnlyFans wild kind of do what I
Like,
want kind of energy. We always have to bring Bonnie Blue up, don't we, every podcast?
absolutely.
But she's so big in the news cycle here in the UK. And I've been looking into her chart and some of these other girls as well. And it's
Interesting.
really interesting. There's a lot of chironic energy, as you would imagine. But these are the kind of the two options that a lot of the young girls are growing up perceiving at this time. So how can we, um, as Neptune moves into Aries, as Urania goes into Gemini, how can we bring through a different way, a new way, a third way where they can be integrated in their
Mm.
wholeness?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think for both of those options, it's a lost option. It's the lost girl, the lost child option because you either go down the trad wife, which is, and we could talk for ages about the rise of fundamental Christianity and that
Mm,
kind of, or any fundamental religion where you are controlled by the patriarchy, or you could go down the OnlyFans route. Hello, Bonnie, if you're listening, we wish you were. And
yeah.
you are
Once
very
again.
much playing the patriarchal game of prostitution. So, sorry, no offense, but you are essentially. Um, so yeah, we are here to bring forward that third way. It's the red thread that connects us all throughout the aeons, isn't it? Or the silver thread for us
Mm,
as priestess astrologers. But it's pulling that in together and being able to reach out through social media however we need to pull them in to show them that there is another way, that there is more magic to life than being paid to be a wife or being paid to flaunt self. It's to me, both whether you're a trad wife or the OnlyFans path, both the same. You're kind of stuck in the patriarchal prostitute kind of victim culture. If that's where we kind of come forward and bring those energies and the teachings that through the Stellar Mystery School, through the Silver Spiral, through the work that we know we're going to be doing over the summer, apparently, that we know that that's that energy that we're bringing back through. I think it's going to be hugely important and part of we just want to pull in as well as women of our age, but pull in the younger ones so that they can be the influencers, going forward. I think it's going to be a really fascinating time because Neptune in Aries can be identity crisis, and you see these women have got an identity crisis to some respect. They've hooked onto a label, but who are they really? And will the delusion and illusion of Neptune really strip them back to allow them to do that shadow work, which they need to do personally, but we also need to do collectively as well. It's the stripping away of false identities, I think, is going to be really interesting for women, but also on the collective as well.
absolutely. And I think that, you know, these behaviors are driven from a desire for approval and a disconnection from our own
Mm.
power, which is why I am very keen on people embracing the Aries archetype. You know, we are both Aries,
From fairies.
and for both of us, I think, our big kind of vow in this life is to, or intention is to empower women. And we do that through astrology because that can really reveal to you the deep magic of who you are and who you have been. But I think the key to all of this is women coming back into their power, into self resourcing. So they're defining themselves, which Aries is very good at.
Mm.
Yeah, Aries is very, very good at knowing who they are. Neptune is the distortion of that.
Mm.
So I think this energy, we have to be really strong in who we know ourselves to be and really strong in that deep oracular feminine power and that intuition, which is the gift of the feminine, which is, as you quite rightly said, what they're trying to suppress right now. There's a big siphoning that is happening.
Mm.
So the more that we can become rooted and self-sourced, I think, that is the key to humanity avoiding some of these more dystopian timelines.
Absolutely. And it's going to be really checking in during this time of, where are we in victim mode? and how can we move ourselves out of victim mode? Hello, twinkle, darling. Actually, can we take more responsibility for ourselves as well? And as we do that, we get back in touch with our inner power a lot more. But it's a question to kind of leave hanging for people who are listening is, how have you already given your power away? How have you given responsibility or thought for an action to another person, for example, the state? How have you let them tell you what to do? What are your boundaries like? Can you say no? Are you constantly in people pleasing mode? Libra risings, we know that can be so, but
Mm,
knowing who you are, standing in your own power, setting your boundaries, and really pulling down and giving yourself permission to be powerful. And that's the one thing that we're not very good at, is giving ourselves permission to be powerful, because that power scares us more than being stuck in a box for the rest of our lives.
absolutely. And that is what the red frequency, the Aries frequency, the Babylon frequency, the Venus frequency is all about. I think that
Yeah.
is Venus in Aries. That is, the highest archetype of that is a woman who is fully embodied in her power, who knows who she is, and therefore cannot be distracted by seeking approval or validation.
Mm.
So I think that's one of the big lessons for us to learn, because that is the key energy of Venus retrograde is I'm not enough. I don't have enough. But when we can really, it's Lilith now, here we can really tap into that frequency, that Venus energy, which is that magnetism. And, we can know that what we have and what we are is already enough. That's when we can expand into more. So Venus has snuck in a little bit today. We were meant to be talking about Neptunia, but we've got no chance, have we, of being
I'm just thinking
retrograde?
how in my ear at the moment Babylon's like, yes, and I want a podcast devoted to me, please, as well.
Oh, well, that can be done. That can be done.
Can be
Um,
indeed. But we're in very much this, as we're recording, and I'm starting to feel it again, this very strange vortex, this on the cusp of something that we're not quite sure. And I just, as we were talking then, just felt that
mm,
kind of wave coming back over of this sort of illusion, delusion, but also almost like someone in the back kitchen is cooking something up for the collective. I don't know how you're feeling.
absolutely. And in typical Mercury retrograde fashion, we've got a shorter time today, haven't we? Or we
Oh
could
yeah.
probably talk for ages. Typical Mercury fashion, I've just had an emergency call to pick my niece up from school. So we're talking very fast because we've got lots that we
Very
want to
fast.
share with you today.
Well, we're Mercury in
Um,
Aries, so we can talk really, really fast.
yeah, super fast and super bland. But I think that is the energy of eclipses as well. So it's really important to think about eclipses from the ancestral perspective, because when we look at a lot of the stone circles, actually, even the huge ones like the magnificent Stonehenge, right down to some of the smaller ones, the lunar temples in Cornwall, we can see that they are aligned to the ecliptic or eclipse cycles. So
Mm,
eclipses since ancient times were known to be very, very powerful. And there's almost a primordial fear in us that surfaces during eclipse periods because we don't like change
mm,
as humans, but also because those astral gateways are open and anything is possible. So as we were talking about before we jumped on, it's really important to keep your practices, to keep your energy protected, to give yourself space during these times, because there are distortions and there are strange rumblings and the collective energy is very, very dense. So just be aware because there's a lot going on, and there is a bit of an astral battle going on, isn't there? Let's be real.
To be honest.
Yes, let's say it as it is in true its fashion.
We don't do doom and gloom, but
So, as our priestess forebearers who lived through these times, who lived through the great age of Aries, the Romans, the Crusades, how can we call on them and draw on them for strength and guidance as we come to this next turning of the wheel? I think that's maybe the thought we can leave people with
that is
today.
really, really beautiful. And as always,
Mm.
just want to extend our gratitude to everyone who has listened to us, is listening to us. And of course, if we can support you during these turbulent times, we're more than happy to do so, sharing our practices and how to keep grounded, that kind of thing. But yeah, just so much gratitude. And we will be back to look at Saturnia in Aries very soon. So sending you all so much love.